Do you see me down here? Bottom right hand corner. It's good to see you. Today we're going to be learning about John Philip Sousa. If you are a older student of mine, this will probably sound like a review, in which case you probably don't need to watch this. But if it doesn't sound familiar, then perhaps you should. Now, before we get started, let's go ahead and look at what John Philip Sousa is wearing. Look at his outfit. What does it make you think of? Have you ever seen somebody wear something like this, either in person or in pictures? To me, I could see it looking kind of like a marching band uniform or maybe a military uniform or maybe even something you would wear if you are the ringleader of a circus, ringmaster. I don't know. Let's go ahead and find out. So, John Philip Sousa was a composer and a musician born in 1854 in Washington, D.C. He traveled to a lot of other places in the world, but he's known as being a great American composer. This is a big deal. Maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but he was born 166 years ago, if you're watching this in 2020. And a lot of the music we were listening to back then here in America weren't necessarily from America. We had a lot of music being created in Europe, so in England, in France, in Germany, in Italy, but not as much that was being created here. But John Philip Sousa was composing here, so that's kind of a big deal. And in case you have forgotten, a composer is someone who creates music either by writing it in musical notation. So that's when we have those 5 lines that go across. That's our staff. And you could put notes on the staff. That's one way to write music. Or improvisation, which is when you make it up as you go. Improvisation should sound a little familiar to you because we talked about that when we learned about jazz music. Sound familiar? Now, a musician is somebody who plays a musical instrument. All of us, we are musicians. We sing. Many of us have played instruments before as well. And John Philip Sousa was both. He not only played the music and sang the music, but he also created it too. And in case you don't remember, or in case you don't know, Washington, D.C. is the capital of the United States of America. Established in July 16th, 1790. It's between Maryland and Virginia. That's where all the big decisions are made. It's the capital of the USA. So that's where the president lives. That's where people meet to make these decisions, not only about the United States, but also about how we interact with other countries around the world. So a lot of people are affected by the decisions that are made in Washington, D.C. But let's go ahead and keep learning about John Philip Sousa and his music. Now, when he was young, he started playing a bunch of different instruments such as violin, piano, flute, cornet, and trombone. And when he was 13, which is around 8th grade, he told his parents he wanted to run away and join the circus band. But instead, his father enlisted him in the United States Marine Band as his apprentice. So back then, if you wanted to be a full-time musician, you didn't really have a lot of options. And John Philip Sousa was pretty young, but he was very determined to just be a musician, to travel around and make music. And so when he went to his parents saying that he was ready to run away and chase his dreams, his father was a little concerned, but knew that if he was in the military, specifically if he was in the Marines, he would have that structure that he needed to succeed, and he would still be able to chase his dreams of making music and performing a whole lot. So John Philip Sousa was in the Marines for 6 years. He was active in the Marines. He was playing in the band, but he was also training to be a soldier. But once those 6 years were up, he still continued to play with the band for 10 more years. And he wasn't just playing with them, he was leading them. And he was also composing for them. He was writing some of the music that they were playing. And the reason we're learning about this now, in case you were watching this later, right now is the month of November. The reason we're learning about this now is because John Philip Sousa served in the military. The Marines is a branch of the military. That means that he's a veteran. And in the month of November, we have Veterans Day, which is a day that we use to honor and thank all the people who served in the military, past and present, who have given up multiple aspects of their life, for some of them for a couple years, some of them for decades, in order to protect us and keep us safe and give us somewhere to live and be proud of. So that's why we're learning about this now. But let's talk about those instruments that John Philip Sousa was playing. I said there were 5 of them: violin, piano, flute, cornet, and trombone. Let's see if we can identify them. I think for the most part, it should be pretty easy. If you can see my mouse, then you can see that I am circling it around. The instrument in the bottom left-hand corner, what is that instrument that we have in the bottom left-hand corner? That is a piano. What's a piano? And above the piano, we have this long, shiny thing. This would be a flute. Yes, a nice woodwind instrument, something you play over here. And then in the middle, on the bottom, we have this one. Hopefully you remember this. It's the one that you go, it slides out to adjust the pitch. And it is what instrument? A trombone. This one is a trombone, a brass instrument that you buzz your lips into. And then look at the bottom right-hand corner. I'm going to move my face up here. Look at the instrument in the bottom right-hand corner. Hopefully you know what instrument that is. You've seen it many, many, many times. It is a violin. And then what is this instrument that we have that is above the trombone and the violin? What is this right here? Do you know? It kind of looks like a trumpet, doesn't it? And that's kind of what we want to assume that it is. But look at our options: violin, piano, flute, cornet, and trombone. There is no trumpet in our options. So let's use a process of elimination, okay? So is it a violin? No, because we know that the violin's in the bottom right-hand corner. Is it a piano? No, because we know that piano is the bottom left-hand corner. Is it a flute? No, because we know that the flute is here above the piano. Is it a cornet? Maybe. We haven't talked about a cornet yet. Let's see what our last option is: trombone. We know it's not a trombone because that's in the middle on the bottom. So this must be a cornet. We used process of elimination to figure out that this is a cornet. And yes, it does look like a trumpet. It's very similar to a trumpet, but just a little different. If you play trumpet in band, perhaps in the future, or maybe even now, once you get a little bit older, perhaps like high school aged, you might be given a piece of music that says cornet part 1. And you're going to look at it and say, I don't play cornet, I play trumpet. But you would be playing that cornet part on the trumpet. They have a lot of similarities. But let's go ahead and keep learning. John Philip Sousa's music. Now, he became very famous and was known as the March King. And sometimes we still even call him that because he wrote 135 marches. That's a lot of different pieces of music. And the marches are usually written for bands. And that includes what is now the official march of the United States of America, the Stars and Stripes Forever. We're going to go ahead and listen to that piece of music. Give me 1 second to pull it up. I believe it will sound familiar to you. I could be wrong. Perhaps it won't, but I am pretty sure at least 1 or 2 parts will sound kind of familiar. But let's see. We will listen to the whole thing. Again, this is the official march of the United States of America, which is called the Stars and Stripes Forever. Here we go. So I wonder if any part of that piece of music sounded familiar to you. I think perhaps maybe two different parts, but just a little bit. It starts dun da da dun 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 dun. That part might have sounded familiar. And then towards the end we have the da 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 da. Da, 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 da. I think those two parts might sound familiar, but maybe not. I could be wrong. Now, the Stars and Stripes Forever, that's Sousa's most famous piece of music. But a lot of his marches have become well known, so we're not limited to just that. Another popular march we have from him is the official march of the United States Marine Corps, which is where he was in the military. That's called Semper Fidelis. But he also wrote the official march of the United States Navy, Anchor and Star, the official march of the United States Army, Army Goes Rolling Along. But my favorite march by John Philip Sousa, I think, is the Liberty Bell. Let's listen to just a little bit of each of these pieces just to kind of get a feel for it, because soon we're going to be talking about what a march is. And I want you to kind of have a couple different examples in your head already. So let's take a sneak peek at Semper Fidelis. We'll only listen to a little bit. Let's see what you think. So that one was Semper Fidelis. And let's go ahead and skip ahead. And we're just going to listen to some of the Liberty Bell. It's going to take me a second just to find the right spot so we can start at the beginning of the song. but I want you to pay attention to the sounds that you hear. So, the Liberty Bell, this recording is a live recording. So, there are people in the audience listening to it while the orchestra was playing it. But see if you can notice a couple different sounds in there that perhaps aren't part of the actual composition that John Philip Sousa wrote. So here we go. Give me 1 second to get to the right part.
There have probably been 8 or 9 attempts to fix the bell. Every time they've done it, somehow that crack always comes back. The last attempt was in the 1970s. This, however, was short-lived. At the time, a British comedy troupe was passing through Philadelphia. Once again.
Okay, so that was just an example, a little bit of the Liberty Bell. And I wonder if you noticed in there, I know there was some laughing. I know there was a guy talking at the beginning part. But besides that, did you notice any sounds that perhaps weren't exactly supposed to be there? We'll talk about it in a second. So we keep talking about this word march, right? But we don't really know exactly what it means. I'm going to put myself down here for now. So what is a march? I said John Philip Sousa wrote 135 marches. I said that he's known as the March King. But what does that mean? Am I talking about the month of March? Does he only write music in the month of March? No. But a march it's a style of music. It's a piece of music that has a strong, steady beat, which was written for bands or soldiers to march to. Now, the last example, it was played by an orchestra, so there were some string instruments in there, but usually it's written for a band, which would be no stringed instruments. And when we listen to those marches, did you ever want to march your feet to the beat at all? Or maybe move your shoulders, tap your head, maybe tap your toes a bit, or the sound that I was asking about a little bit ago, clapping. There are people that were clapping to that beat, right? And so a march has this strong, steady beat. And what I mean by that is that there's this heartbeat to the music. It's this constant pulse. It never goes away in this type of music. And it's not even just in music. We have it in other forms. We have it in chants or in rhymes like poetry or even cheers. Imagine if you were at a football game, go team, go, go team, go. There's this pulse that we're talking about, this steady beat, and you chant over it. And by having this steady beat present in our music, in our cheers, in our poetry, it helps draw people in. It engages them, makes them want to participate. And that's pretty important when we're talking about music that is a march, because it gives us a sense of pride, a little bit of ownership to the music, and it makes us feel patriotic. which is kind of what he was going for. Now, at the time, it was written for soldiers to march to. So it was common for musicians to be going into battle with the soldiers. Perhaps you've seen pictures that have a drummer as it's leading this army or leading this military group into battle. That is not uncommon. That was the norm at the time. We used music to help us gather people, gather the soldiers to the battle, to help keep them together, to help them walk together, and to give them a little bit of boost of energy too, you know? So that's where this steady beat comes important. And it makes us feel patriotic. It makes us feel proud. You would hear this music. Oh, I'm answering another question, but that's okay. You would hear this music perhaps around the 4th of July if there was a parade. Perhaps you were to go to a parade and you would see the high school marching band walking down. They'd be walking together. Each person would have right, left, going at the same pace and the same tempo. And that's where we would hear that music. We could also hear it. Where else? I'm going to play you one more song. This song is not by John Philip Sousa. It is a march. It's my favorite march. And so I want you to hear it, and I'm wondering if it would sound a little familiar to you. Let's see if you've ever heard this before. Here it goes. So that song started, and I am very confident that it probably sounded familiar to you. You've probably heard that before, right? It makes me think about a circus, but even a carnival. If you were to go play a carnival game, let's say you're at like the bowling alley, sometimes they have those little arcades. So you're playing an arcade game, the claw that comes down to grab the toy. Sometimes that song is played in the background, or skee ball. The song is played in the background there too. So you've probably heard that song before. So we would hear it at parades. We would hear it in the military. We would hear it around the 4th of July, but we also might hear this style of music at the circus too. Come in full circle. Remember how John Philip Sousa wanted to join the circus? I don't know. I just have one more cool thing to tell you about John Philip Sousa. Now, when he was working with the military, when he was working with the Marines, and he was their band leader, I want you to take a second and think about a tuba, a normal tuba. If you are one of my students, and you were one of my students last school year, you know that I carried around a tuba on my music cart, and I would bring it into the classrooms. And sometimes if we would have time, or if we were talking about different instrument families, I would pull it out and I would play it. It was this big, heavy metal instrument. I would also play it after school, sometimes in the hallway. Big, heavy metal instrument. And I would have to sit down to play it. I would hold it in front of me in order to play it and blow into the instrument to make the music. It wasn't really comfortable. It wasn't exactly the easiest thing to carry around, but it worked. Now, imagine those tubas marching into battle with the military. Could you imagine that? Imagine me carrying that big hunk of metal tubes in front of me, trying to play it, trying to blow into it while also trying to walk at the right speed. There's no way. There's no way I could do it. And honestly, John Philip Sousa looked at the instrument players struggling and he said, there's no way they can do it either. It was just too hard. It wasn't convenient. So John Philip Sousa contacted a guy named J.W. Pepper, who was his famous instrument maker at the time. And they worked together to figure out a solution to their problem. The problem being the tuba players can't march and play at the same time without dropping it, probably. It was just too hard. It was too inconvenient. That was their problem. So they needed a solution to their problem. And the solution ended up being that they got the metal hot and they, unlooped all these long tubes that made the tuba. And then they recoiled it in a circle. Instead of being a tight hunk of metal, they loosened it up and they turned it into a circle. And by making it a circle, it was this big round circle that the players could put around their bodies and rest on their shoulder. So instead of all this weight being in front of them in their arms, the weight was on their shoulders instead. It was still heavy, but it was easier for them to carry. It's kind of like, imagine that you have to take home a dozen books, 12 books. You have to take home 12 books from school, and they're big, heavy books. And you can carry them, but it's hard to carry them. They're a little heavy. It's kind of awkward. You don't want to drop anything. So you put them in your book bag, and suddenly that weight goes on your shoulder. It's still kind of heavy, but it's much easier for you to walk and carry and do other things at the same time. So this is the same idea. We make the tuba a big circle to go around the body so the weight's on the shoulder so you can play it and you can keep in time and stay in rhythm with everybody else who's around you and march down the street. And we use this in marching bands now too. It's not just for the military, but we use it in marching bands too. And you might have even seen one in real life. This new tuba that John Philip Sousa and J.W. Pepper created, they called it the sousaphone. Sousa named it after himself. He might have been a little arrogant like that. And you can see it in this top right-hand corner, right? You see that sousaphone. Well, I'm going to go ahead and move myself in front of it because there is a picture of me playing it. If you came to school for the outside Halloween parade this year, then you saw me playing the sousaphone. Walking down the street, I had the tuba on my shoulder, carrying that weight so I could walk and play at the same time. And that is where we got the sousaphone. So you have now learned about John Philip Sousa, an extremely wonderful composer, American composer, who has written some songs that I'm sure you have heard before. And even if none of the music sounded familiar today, perhaps as you are living your life for the next couple of years, you'll start to notice, hey, this song sounds like that song that we heard in music class by that one guy. And you'll start to realize that he wrote a lot of familiar pieces. Okay, have a wonderful day. It's always good to see you, and I can't wait to see you again soon. Bye.